Good morning, everybody. It's nice to see you here. So, I believe that an article was shared with you about the sustainable compassion training practices that explores ways in which psychology intersects and can inform SCT. And it really gives a sort of complete layout of the practices. And so I'm going to say, I want to say a few things generally on that direction about the intersection of psychology with contemplative practices, and then we'll do a practice and then open it up for discussion about really in any direction in terms of your questions about SCT in relation to psychology or psychology and Buddhism generally, and see where the discussion goes. So in my mind, scientific frameworks and concepts for us in modern cultures where we've been raised to value scientific concepts can be very supportive for SCT. And in particular, I think they can help us become more receptive to nature of mind. So Lama John has talked about receptivity to nature of mind as a key to the whole process. And I see science as supporting that receptivity. This is how it's been for me in my practice. And so I want to share some of those ways that science can help us with receptivity to nature of mind. So the key here is that it's really a support. It's a kind of secondary support for accessing and deepening and reunifying with nature of mind. Not necessarily something that we would bring in to try to justify or rationalize our teachings, but a support. So there's sort of two key things. First, science can help translate Buddhist concepts and contemplative practice theory into words and concepts that are readily accessible for us, that are just part of our culture and easy for us to understand. So an example is the idea of innate goodness. We might have some doubt about that. What does that even mean that we have innate goodness? Am I really good? What about people that are selfish or do bad things? But we know from a lot of different areas of science, evolutionary psychology, and biology that humans have the capacity for care. It's part of our basic nature from evolution. And it's actually necessary for us to survive. So humans are physically not very impressive compared to a lot of other animals on Earth, and yet because of our capacities for connection and collaboration and care, we have superior capacities, even though we're not physically dominating. So that capacity to connect and share and have a relationship is key to our success. So that's a simple way of relating to this idea of innate goodness. Science can also help by introducing vocabulary that adds precision to our understanding of meditation, instruction, and experience. So I think that might start to become familiar to you just in reflecting on SCT teachings that you've already had, thinking about how noticing senses of ourself or different kinds of attachment scripts that might get activated within meditation can help us to become more conscious of our experience and then include it right within the practice. This is a teaching that John has given quite frequently in the past 2 years. And that then points to the second key function, which is to integrate our experiences. So by noticing our difficulties or noticing our experiences and relating to them to psychological or scientific concepts, it's helping us to construct a sort of more dynamic relationship between our physical sensations in our body, our past memories, and the sensations from the external world. As we develop this sort of increasing precision with vocabulary, we have this more flexible dynamic construction of our experience so that it becomes more pliable and easier for us to relate to all of our experience and include it within meditation. So it's like this scientific vocabulary within meditative experience, not just reading about it kind of analytically, but really adding it into our contemplative experience and noticing our contemplative experiences with this added vocabulary is helping the mind become more flexible and pliable. And then because of that, we're not so stuck in our experience as if that's the only way that it is, or if that's just the whole truth. So I think there's something here where these concepts are helping us become more receptive to nature of mind. So I wanted to read a couple quotes from some other authors that help draw out the meaning of this project of bringing psychology into SCT. This first one is from George Dreyfus, who is a Tibetan Buddhist scholar, and he was one of the first Westerners, a European, to earn the title of Geshe in a Gelug monastery. And this is from his book called Recognizing Reality. And he's writing about the task of translating Tibetan philosophical concepts into Western dialogues. He says, "It seems to me that one of our tasks as students of Asian thought is to present the material we examine so that it gradually becomes integrated into the larger history of ideas. There's a need for presenting non-Western ideas in terms that can be related to the concepts of other cultures." So now this is my words. So scientific concepts are the concepts of our culture, of our psychological culture increasingly, and this offers an important avenue for us to connect with non-Western ideas, such as Tibetan philosophical ideas and contemplative practices. So also key in this project, I think, is there's a kind of dialogue or a back and forth component where it's not just psychology sort of taking over and informing contemplative practices, but the two can, in partnership, draw out features of each other. And okay, so here's another part. Dreyfus continues. He says that a risk in introducing a kind of universal psychological concepts, we risk damaging beyond repair the material we intend to relieve. Still, it seems to be that the risk has to be taken. For the alternative, irrelevance is hardly desirable. As a Western scholarly community, we can't avoid using these kinds of universal concepts in examining the ideas of other cultures. We have to use our own words with all their history and associations and face the prospect of transforming the traditions we examine. What we can do is to be careful not to succumb to the temptation of believing that the description we obtain by using a standard Western vocabulary is normative. That is the last word on the question, which allows us to pass a judgment on the traditions we study. Rather, it seems to me that this is the first step after which a deeper exploration of tradition can take place. So this quote really struck me because he's talking about translating some really deep, complicated Tibetan philosophical ideas and bringing them into dialogue with Western philosophical ideas. But it feels to me that this is similar to what is happening with SCT, that we're taking practices from a different culture that for many of us have maybe felt inaccessible or unrelatable, and yet we feel inspired by the culture and the qualities that they have embodied, and now looking for a way to translate and access that in our culture, in our unique position, in our bodies. And SCT offers a model in which we can find access and connect with aspects of Tibetan traditions in our cultural contexts and concepts. And then in doing that, we can do what Dreyfus is saying, which is take a step towards a deeper exploration of that very tradition, of the Tibetan tradition. So it's a supportive process in going deeper into the very tradition that we're trying to connect with. So I'll share one more and then we'll do some practice. This next one is from Anne Glag, who's a Buddhist scholar, and she writes about diversifying the language of Buddhist teachings for diverse audiences. And she's writing about how there's some tension here between the idea of sort of preserving a kind of maybe original or essential teaching versus adapting for diverse audiences. And she writes about a teacher named Larry Yang who has worked on diversifying Buddhist teachings. And she says that one way that Yang has legitimized diversity and inclusion work is through a reference to a story in the Pali Canon, in which the Buddha is approached by two Brahmin monastics who are concerned that the teachings of the Dharma are being corrupted because others are putting the teachings into their own dialect. They suggest that the teachings should be rendered into classical meter. The Buddha, however, rebukes them and states, "Monastics, the words of the Buddha are not to be rendered into classical meter. Whoever does so commits an offense of wrongdoing. I allow the words of the Buddha to be learned in one's own language." Pointing out that in oral cultures, language is determinative of culture, Yang argues that in effect, the Buddha was saying that the Dharma should be taught in different cultural contexts. So science is just one such language and one such culture through which we can connect with another culture and relate to another culture. And that's how I see it supporting us in our practice and our collective work that we're doing together. So with that framework in mind, I thought we could do a practice, and I'll say a little bit about how this practice, how it's connecting for me within some ideas with psychology. So in the receptive mode practice, we're taught to notice, well, first we access loving qualities from our own awareness through the field of care. So bringing to mind a caring moment or benefactor or special place. And that becomes a field of care within which we experience ourselves, experience loving qualities from our awareness, experiencing ourselves as held and deeply worthy and resonating with our deepest potential. And then notice whatever mental reactivities are coming up. And we can notice that as a sense of self or a part of us that is having some difficulty with the meditation, or maybe a difficult feeling that's arising. And when we just allow those senses of self or feelings to be included within the loving spaciousness, allow them to experience the loving spaciousness. And the key thing here that occurred to me is that in social psychology in particular, and also in some areas of developmental psychology, but in social psychology in particular, there's a lot of discussion about how our senses of self, our identities, and even our low levels of perception, meaning experiences that aren't fully conscious, but maybe only subtly conscious to us or minimally conscious. Our low levels of perception and feelings are also constructed in a social field. So Kurt Lewin was one of the first people to introduce the idea of social psychology, and he talked about field theory and how our thoughts and feelings and actions and perceptions and like everything is influenced by our social environment. So to me, that means like any feeling that we're having that arises within meditation, any difficult feeling that we're experiencing, or a sense of self that arises, and we do receptive mode practice with that, allowing it to be included, what's happening is we're also allowing others to be included right in that moment, even if we're not fully aware of it already. Because those very thoughts and feelings and perceptions have been constructed through relations with others. So others are implicated in those thoughts and feelings in some way, even if we're not at first aware of it. So when we do the receptive mode practice, we're already including others in some way. And then when we get to an inclusive mode of practice, of intentionally including others, we can just continue. We don't really have to do anything more. We can just continue to do that same practice of accessing loving qualities, noticing whatever's arising in our experience, noticing feelings or situations from our life that are arising in our mind, and just notice whoever is there, who is connected to that thought or feeling, and just let them be included right alongside your sense of self or your feelings, and allow them to experience the loving spaciousness of the field of care. So it's a direct continuation or a direct parallel with that way that we've been practicing. So does that sound okay? Can we do that practice? Okay, so let's take a moment to just freshen up a bit, stretch out, or walk around if you need, whatever your body needs. And then when you're ready, finding your way to a comfortable position. Feeling the support of the chair or the cushion or floor beneath you. And just allowing the mind to drop down into the body. Noticing the felt sense of the body. And then noticing the breath, noticing the natural groundedness of the breath, wherever it's most salient for you. And now bring to mind your field of care, and bringing that to mind as if it's present to you now, not a distant memory, but that person or being is present, taking joy in you, wishing you well, happy that you exist. And resonating with you in your deepest potential, communing with you. And notice the qualities that come with this field of care. Maybe a feeling of warmth or peace or rest, however it is for you. And just explore accepting those energies and qualities into your whole body and mind. Every part of you loved in its very being. And if the practice gets stale or rigid, you can just take a break for a moment and then freshly recall the caring moment or your field of care, bringing it to mind again as really present. And now notice whatever thoughts or feelings are arising, whatever sense of self is arising, or whatever situations on your mind. And allow that sense of self to be included so that it can experience the loving qualities. Allowing that sense of self to just find its own way of being here. And see if you notice thoughts of others coming to mind. Might just be subtle. Might just be a subtle noticing at first, and just gently letting them be included within the field of care. Without trying to make anything happen. Just allowing them to be here. And communing with them in their potential and worth. Just happy that they exist. And then we can let go of the visualization and just allow your heart and mind to fall open. Letting these loving qualities and energies to help your mind to just trust and relax. So that any thoughts or feelings that arise can just unwind and release within this spaciousness and warmth, just by letting everything be.